You had a bull. He responded to your call. He was coming. And then something happened. He slowed down, he stopped, he circled, he vanished. And you've been replaying that encounter ever since, trying to figure out what went wrong. Here's what I can tell you after 34 years of elk hunting and guiding Western elk. In most of those situations, the call wasn't the problem. The decisions around the call were the problem. When you called, how much you called, where you were standing or set up when you called, and what you did when the bull started closing distance. Calling brings elk in, absolutely, but the mistakes I'm about to walk through are what pushes them back out. Here's the problem most elk hunters have with calling. They think about it as a skill isolated from everything else. A call, a sound, a response. They practice the sounds. They buy better calls. They study cadence and pitch. And then September comes and bulls are hanging up, circling, shutting down, or blowing out inside 60 yards, and they don't understand why. Calling doesn't exist in a vacuum. It's just one piece of a system. And the decisions before the call, during the call, and after the bull responds are what actually determine whether you close the encounter or just educate another bull. Identify these mistakes. Fix them now, and September is going to stop being the month you almost killed a bull. Now, I've spent 34 years hunting and guiding Western big game and 30 years as a professional strength conditioning and nutrition coach, working with athletes at every level, including years competing as an elite athlete myself. What I've learned across all those domains is that the most damaging mistakes are rarely the obvious ones. They're the habits that get wired in early, feel completely natural under pressure, and quietly cost you performance year after year without you ever pinpointing the real cause. Elk calling is no different. Let's go through each one of these mistakes. The single most common and most expensive calling mistake elk hunters make is calling too much. The instinct when a bull goes quiet or when you want to keep him interested is to fill the silence, give him more, keep the conversation going. And that instinct is wrong most of the time, I think. Here's what's actually happening when you overcall. You're handing the bull information. Every sound you make tells him something about your location, your distance, your direction. The more precisely he can map the source, the more likely he is to hang up outside your effective range and wait for visual confirmation before committing. When he can see exactly where the sound is coming from and there's no elk there, the encounter's over. I believe that the hunters who consistently close bulls call significantly less than the hunters who don't. Not because calling doesn't work, obviously. I love to call in the right situation, but because restraint is what creates the uncertainty that keeps a bull moving. A bull who isn't getting enough information keeps closing the distance to find out more. A bull who's getting constant, precise information from a stationary source hangs up, and he's going to wait for you to show yourself. The system we teach our clients is built around one core principle regarding calling frequency. Never give away more information than you have to. Every sound you make is a data point for the bull, right? Make fewer of those. Make each one count. And that restraint only works if you've already made the first decision correctly, where you're standing and whether the wind is right before you start to call. And this mistake happens before you ever open your mouth, right? And it's the reason that a call can work perfectly and the encounter still falls apart. A hunter hears a bull. The instinct is to stop and call immediately. But calling before you've checked the wind, before you know where the bull actually is relative to your position, before you've identified a setup location that controls his approach and breaks his sight line, that's calling without a plan. The call produces a response, sure, but the setup produces a shot, and you haven't even thought that far ahead. The first thing that happens when a bull responds before any sound goes back is a wind and thermal check. Where is the air moving, and is it carrying your scent towards the bull or away from him? That single question then determines whether the encounter is actually viable. If the wind is wrong, the call doesn't matter. You're already burned, so you have to fix that first. After the wind, Where is he and how far? Those answers determine whether you move before calling again or set up where you're at. The position you call from is a decision, not a coincidence. It should account for the wind, the terrain between you and the bull, and where you need to be to give the shooter a realistic opportunity when he closes. Call first, think second, and you're running on luck. Think first, set up correctly, then call. Now you're running a real system that can work. Hey, if you hunt public land elk and you're tired of grinding through random seasons, I built the elk hunting series of ebooks for you. Most hunters don't struggle because they lack effort. They struggle because they lack a system. And that's exactly why I built the elk hunting ebook series as a complete progressive framework for Western elk hunters who are done guessing and ready to hunt with intention. Volume 1 is going to be Foundations and Reality. I reset your mindset and expose the assumptions that quietly wreck seasons. In Volume 2, Finding Elk and Understanding Pressure, you'll learn how elk actually move under pressure so you can anticipate instead of react. In Volume 3, Terrain, Wind, and Position, I break down how to use landscape and thermals to consistently create opportunities. In Volume 4, Calling, Silence, and Pressure, sound becomes a decision tool, not an impulse. In Volume 5, Bow Hunting Execution, we're talking about close range strategy so you can finish your encounters. And in Volume 6, Late Season and Post Rut, we're talking about how elk shift after the rut and how to adapt when others quit. This is a system built for consistency. This isn't theory, it's a structured system to help you find elk, read country, and make confident decisions every season. Buy each volume individually or bundle them all to save 50% off at backboneunlimited.com. But even when you do all of that right, wind checked, position chosen, there's one more positioning variable that ends more setups than hunters ever recognize in the moment. This is one of the most misdiagnosed failures in elk calling, and it consistently gets blamed on the wrong thing. The scenario: you call a bull, he responds, he closes some distance, then he stops. So you call again. He answers, but won't come. So you change calls, same result. You start thinking the bull isn't willing, or you're using the wrong sound, or he has cows. But I think most of the time that's not what's happening. What's happening is the bull can see the piece of ground where your sound is coming from, and there's no elk there. He knows what an elk in that terrain looks like. He's looking at where you should be. You aren't there. So he stops. This is not a calling problem, it's a terrain problem. Your setup didn't use a feature that breaks his sight line before he gets inside your range. He's got the visual before he got close enough, and the visual didn't add up. The fix here is always a positioning fix, not a calling fix. Set up behind a timbered point or a bench edge or a ridge line, anything that forces him to close the distance before he can confirm what's actually making the sound. We covered this in depth in my last episode in using terrain as a weapon, and it's a core principle of the system we teach our Backbone Unlimited clients. The call brings him in, but the terrain helps you close him. Once the terrain is doing its job and a bull commits and starts closing, that's exactly when the next mistake shows up. So when a bull is coming in, you've got to stop calling. If he's already on his way, you don't need to keep talking to him. This sounds really simple and is almost impossible to execute in the moment, because when a bull commits and starts closing, every instinct inside you tells you to keep doing what's working. Here's what's actually happening. A bull that commits has already made the decision to investigate. He doesn't need more information. He's moving towards the source. Every additional call you make gives him a more precise location, which means he slows down as he gets close. He circles to get confirmation or catch the wind, or he stops just outside a range and waits for you to show yourself. You called him in, sure, and then you called him to a stop. The discipline to go completely silent when a bull is already on the way is one of the hardest things to develop in archery elk hunting, and it's one of the highest leverage habits you can build. Let him come. Let the silence pull him in that last 50 yards. A bull that's moving towards a sound and suddenly hears nothing tends to speed up. He wants to find out what he heard. A bull that keeps getting called at as he approaches gets slower and more cautious with every step. In the system we teach our clients, this principle is foundational. Once a bull is committed in closing, minimal to no calling. The call starts the conversation. The silence helps close the distance. That discipline, Calling less, not more, becomes even more critical when you factor in what hunting pressure does to a bull's willingness to respond to certain sounds at all. Bugles absolutely work. I love to use them in the right situation, but they're also the most common sound elk hunters make on public land to get a bull to respond, which means by the second week of September, every pressured bull in a high traffic unit has been bugled at repeatedly, has had hunters follow his responses, and has learned to hang up, go silent, or circle when he hears a bugle that doesn't seem right. The pressured bull carries what he's learned as a survival behavior, and the fastest way to educate him further is to open every encounter with an aggressive bugle when a subtle cow call would have worked. 9 times out of 10, we start with a cow call for most of the season, not a location bugle, a soft, natural cow mew that sounds exactly like what belongs in that terrain. It's non threatening, and a pressured bull who has learned to ignore bugles will often respond to a cow call he would have walked away from if you'd opened up with a bugle. It's a lower pressure conversation. It doesn't trigger the wariness that an aggressive calling produces, right, in educated animals. So save the bugles for bulls who are already fired up and responsive, and for setups as September pushes towards the peak rut, when that dominance and that sound that you're looking to get that response from that bull matches what's actually happening in the elk's world. On a cold public land bull in early season, lead quiet, lead with the cow. Elk calling is not one playbook, and hunters who run the same strategy from September 1st through the end of the month like it's one playbook are misreading what the elk are doing and what sounds make sense in their world at each phase. Early season and pre-rut, the bulls are not ready to fight, right? Their testosterone's building, they're feeling each other out, but dominance and competition aren't the primary drivers of their behavior yet. Running aggressive challenge bugles and hard raking at a pre-rut bull often shuts him down or pushes him away. You're presenting a behavioral cue that doesn't really match where he's hormonally at right now. Soft cow calls, on the other hand, and gentle mews, quiet contact sounds, that's the language of early September. Now, as we push towards the peak rut, the last week of September into early October, across most of the country we hunt, the dynamic shifts entirely. Bulls are moving, fighting, and chasing. They're responsive to dominant sounds in a way that they weren't 2 weeks earlier. Location bugles start opening up more setups. Raking and challenge calling inside the bubble matches the energy that's already in the woods. The hunters who kill bulls consistently aren't the ones with the best calls either. They're the ones who read where the rut actually is, not where they want it to be. And they match their calling approach to that reality. The elk are always telling you what phase they're in, so we've got to listen before we call. Reading the rut correctly gets a bull fired up and moving, right up until he stops. And what you do in that moment is where most hunters give back everything they just earned. A bull that stops at 70 or 80 yards and refuses to close is one of the most frustrating situations in archery elk hunting, and the most common response to it makes the situation worse almost every time. When a bull hangs up, the instinct is to call more, be more aggressive, rake something, give him something new to react to, and all that typically either locks him in place longer or turns him away, because you're adding information from the same location, which tells him that whatever is over there isn't moving and isn't natural. The correct response? I think it's to go completely silent and wait. A bull that stops is sometimes going to resume moving after 30 to 60 seconds of silence, and that curiosity pulling him those last yards when nothing else pushed him. But what you almost never do is keep calling from the same position in the same way. The system we teach our backbone clients addresses the hung up bull directly because it's one of the most consistent points of failure where a perfect encounter falls apart inside those last 80 yards, which is exactly where this last mistake also lives. Every encounter has a moment where the margin for error disappears entirely. In archery elk hunting, that moment is when a bull is inside that last 60 to 80 yard window and using his ears to locate exactly where the sound came from. At that range, he isn't guessing anymore. He's triangulating. His eyes are scanning for movement. His nose is working on full force, and he's decided, consciously or maybe not, that the next thing that doesn't add up ends this encounter. One boot on a dry branch, one sleeve against a bow limb, one slow turn of the head at the wrong moment. That's all it takes. The bull doesn't blow out dramatically a lot of times either. He simply reads the situation, confirms something is wrong, he caught something that wasn't natural, and he leaves. And you might never know exactly what gave you away. The only play in those final seconds is stillness. Not nearly still, completely frozen, eyes moving, nothing else. If the setup is right, wind controlled, terrain breaking his sight line, shooter already in the correct position before he got close, you don't need to move. So you've got to hold still. That's the last mistake. Your entire job at this point is not to exist until it's time to draw and kill him. The setup either protects you or it doesn't. And by the time he's inside that bubble, you're executing the setup at that point, not trying to fix it. 8 mistakes, 1 root cause. Most elk hunters treat the call like it's the entire conversation when it's really just the opening line. What happens after that first response, the wind you checked before you answered, the position you put yourself in, the silence you held when every instinct told you to call again, the patience you kept when he hung up at 80 yards. That's the conversation that actually fills a tag. The call gets his attention. Everything else is what you do with it. Build the setup first. Read the bull second. Call third. And when he's coming, trust the process and let the silence do what no call ever can. Now, if this episode made you realize you need a better elk plan this season, don't just watch another video and hope it all comes together. Build your plan right now. If you want to study my full system on your own, start with my elk hunting series of ebooks. If you want daily guidance, accountability, and a place to ask questions as season gets closer, join me on Team Backbone. If you want my eyes on your actual hunt plan, your maps, access, terrain, pressure points, wind, thermals, and your actual strategy, book an elk hunt plan audit with me and I'll help you tighten it up before season. If the missing piece is your body, your legs, your lungs, or your ability to handle mountain miles in a heavy pack, check out my Backbone Unlimited training plans. And if nutrition is where you need more structure, getting leaner, fueling long days, or building a better in-season food plan, check out my nutrition plans. The hunters who are ready in September are the ones who start tightening their plan right now. So go to backboneunlimited.com, choose the path that fits where you are right now, and I'll help you get started. Thanks for being here. I appreciate each and every one of you. I'll see you in the comments. You know I read and respond to all of them. Until next time, train harder, hunt smarter, and never settle.